Life is long, and you don't have to rush. And don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously, and really enjoy the journey. I think the most important thing is, like, when you're younger, you're really trying to achieve, at least for myself. And I probably could have had more fun along the way.
The Amber Mack Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mack Show. Coming up on this week's episode, Jeff is going to take a deep dive into prediction markets and why almost 100% of traders lose. And we're also going to talk about the problem with Meta letting users make AI images from public Instagram profile pics.
And our guest this week is one of the co-founders of Spin Master, a global children's entertainment company that's behind iconic brands including Paw Patrol, Hatchimals, Air Hogs, and I'm sure you've heard of Rubik's Cube. But first, let's get into the headlines.
Headlines.
Well, we're going to start off this week's news with a tip we hope all of you Instagram users follow up on. Meta recently released their Muse Image AI image generation feature, and you can think what you want of that, but in a typically sleazy Meta fashion, what you may not have realized is that this launch also included a change to your Instagram settings that introduces permissions to allow other people to use your public Instagram content, including your profile picture, as part of their own AI creations. Permissions that are turned on by default with no notification or any ability to tell when somebody is using your content for their AI.
Before we talk about this a little bit more, I do want to share how exactly you turn this off. And you should really turn this off. Now, it looks like this is just for US users at the time. In fact, I just checked my account and I didn't see this option here. But keep an eye on your settings if you are outside of the US, as I fully expect that this will expand to Canada and beyond. So the first step is go to your Instagram profile page in the app and then click on the three horizontal lines at the top of your profile. From there, scroll down to the, and I'm quoting here, allow people to use your content on Instagram with AI features on Meta, end quote, and then toggle off the settings for both posts and reels.
And I'd like to just jump in here from a user experience angle and point out how completely awful Meta's implementation of toggles is, where an on toggle is just to the right of a black switch graphic, and the off toggle is to the left of the ever so slightly more gray switch graphic, with no other labeling or indication at all to tell you whether it's on or off. So that's terrible for accessibility. I don't know how people with vision difficulties would see the difference between that black and the gray, but it's just another demonstration of how Meta so often fails at even the most basic design features.
It is such a good point, and I think we see this over and over again with many design features of Meta. But really, the bigger problem for me is obviously how tech companies over and over again are introducing new features and then opt in existing users with no clear indication that they've done so. This is the kind of thing that, Jeff, I think it's fair to say, contributes to the mounting trust issues that many of us feel with these tech giants. And it would be so simple, especially in a platform like Instagram, where there are all sorts of alerts for all sorts of things, to just push an alert through to all affected users that said, hey, we've introduced a new setting and turned it on by default. If you'd like to turn it off, please click here. But that's just not how things are done anymore. And it shows, along with the refusal to meaningfully deal with things like scam ads and online predators, how so many social media and tech companies, and I do want to call Meta out here because I think they're the worst, have no respect or empathy for the actual users that make their platforms popular in the first place.
Yeah, the whole we're the product thing, I think they look at us like how, well, they probably don't look at us even with the affinity that a farmer would look at a pig they're going to slaughter. We're just the way they make money. So I couldn't agree more with that. And speaking of Meta, New York State has announced that it will be banning Meta and other smart glasses from all of its courtrooms later this month, following more limited moves in several other states to do the same kind of thing, because you're not allowed to record inside courtrooms generally. And this is just one of many fronts where Meta glasses are being challenged, including human workers reviewing footage that is supposed to be kept completely private, audio recordings of conversations that in many locations require all parties to consent to such a thing, embedded face recognition software that Meta swore they weren't going to use yet, and it has been found in their latest glasses, although maybe not turned on yet, and more things like that. And Amber and I did a segment on that with a bunch of great audience feedback way back in episode 56 called Meta's Pervert Smart Glasses. So you can check that out on YouTube or just go to the old podcast for some more info on that if you'd like.
I remember we got some pretty interesting feedback on that front. I think this is an issue that's going to continue. Sticking with social media giants, a new report from the Cyber Safety Research Center that tested 86 youth safety features on Instagram, Snap, TikTok, and YouTube has uncovered some more uncomfortable truths. Specifically, when measured against whether the youth safety features worked as described or whether youth could realistically find and use them, researchers reported that only a little over 40% of safety features met both of these criteria, showing once again that we really can't trust these companies to do the right thing. And also, these apps and platforms are not designed with the best interests of users in mind.
No, absolutely. And it comes on the heels of, as we've covered, increasing numbers of court cases, finding that companies like Meta are intentionally trying to addict young people with features like infinite scrolling and autoplay and things like that. And while regulators in North America are pretty slow on the uptake, I know we've got our social media act coming through here in Canada. The EU is progressing its actions on this front much more quickly and will likely force a redesign of both Instagram and Facebook in response to those findings, and noting that, quote, Meta did not adequately assess the risks of its addictive design on the physical and mental well-being of users, including minors and vulnerable adults.
I know that we don't always agree with what the EU does on these things, and there have certainly been many cases of overreach, but it's always helpful to have an example of a much more hardline approach to some of these problems we're facing with big tech. So it'll be really interesting to see how this continues to evolve. And speaking of big tech, with SpaceX having recently completed its initial public offering and Anthropic and OpenAI next in line, the PitchBook NVCA Venture Monitor has declared that these three IPOs will generate more value than all U.S. VC backed exits since the year 2000. I remember that year,
Wow.
with the expected total value exceeding 4 trillion US dollars.
Wow, that's I mean, that's 26 years. So 3 companies are going to generate more value than 26 years of companies have. So I know things are a little bit different now, and companies may be waiting for bigger valuations than they used to, but that's still a staggering number, $4 trillion. So it'll be interesting to see how these valuations hold up over time, especially given that I personally think the stock market is in full-in degenerate gambler mode when it comes to AI companies especially, but I have to imagine that White House interventions on AI models, such as restricting and lifting controls on which models can be released, which has been done by Anthropic, which has been done to Anthropic by the U.S. government, and more recently to OpenAI, uh, those kind of moves have got to be causing some concerns for investors. And to be totally clear, I'm not saying there shouldn't be intervention on those things, at least some kind of intervention. But as with most things involving the Trump administration, the current actions seem to be a pretty ad hoc response to something that needs to be done in a much more coherent and understandable way so that the companies can, react and to prevent this from needing to happen, because it's hard to imagine that the people in the U.S. government are the best ones to evaluate that.
Yeah, and I have to say, Chris, who produces this show, is going to probably have a good chuckle at your line about the AI bubble that we're in, especially when you say the stock market is in a full degenerate gambler swing when it comes to AI companies, because he would absolutely agree. And speaking of AI, it's really seeping into everything these days, with Character.ai recently announcing that they will be producing multiple micro drama video series from romance to horror and beyond using their own AI characters. What could go wrong? A fascinating offshoot of this approach, and one that I can imagine human centered series creators will be longing for, is that adult viewers will be able to interact with the AI characters in these series, from Q&A sessions all the way to role playing, new storylines for the shows. And let's not forget that Character.ai is the company that has, for many years, been in a lot of hot water in terms of AI characters and their relationships, especially with kids.
Yeah, yeah, and which we've touched on before, and this the new AI microdrama idea here. You know, uh, I think with the Q&A sessions and role playing new storylines, all that sort of stuff. That that's probably vaguely compelling for some viewers at least. But it's also not impossible for productions that use real human actors to adopt that same approach. So I'm curious to see what the reaction to that will be, if it will be adopted more. I know there's a little bit of that on the human side, but obviously there's a reason to leverage it for AI characters who don't have the time constraints or money constraints that humans do. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how that will go. That'll be very interesting. And in related news, in the increasingly competitive video streaming arena, Netflix shares are down over 40% over the past year in the face of declining user engagement. But no reason to worry, because Netflix has come up with a revolutionary idea to help combat this, namely live scheduled streaming channels, or as we used to call it, television.
I sense a little sarcasm there, Jeff. Now, I know you've talked many times about how streaming has basically evolved to simply recreate the old network television approach to content, with different streaming networks having their own original content that you can only get by subscribing to them. But I have to say that this seems even more uninspired than usual, especially for a company that has been so innovative along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Netflix has certainly come a long way. I think that everyone's desperate to try to do things. I hope what we're seeing is some kind of pushback from users to say that they don't want to be treated like, the like I said, the farmer's pig going off to slaughter so that they can make some money. Because the only way I can understand why somebody would opt for continuously scheduled streaming content over, just choosing what you want to watch and when you want to watch it, which is what streaming would excel at if people had that as their primary motivation. Uh, the only way I can understand this going back to pre-programmed scheduled stuff is that the viewer is so lazy that they don't want to have to choose what they watch, and so addicted to watching that they don't want to stop watching. And when I say that, I guess I can see exactly how that might seem like a good idea to Netflix, as people toss away their last shreds of autonomy to further realize the kind of dystopian human future that we've seen very well realized in movies like 2008's Wall-E. And, given that we're already trying to politically recreate 2006's Idiocracy, why not go full in on life imitating art, right?
Well, I hope not, but it's definitely wild to see how common the operating principle of let's get our users totally addicted to our product has become, something you'll be talking about a little bit later in your segment about prediction markets. And I can't wait for that. But let's hop over to some car related news first, where the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is pleading with autonomous vehicle makers to please stop your robocars from interfering with emergency first responders, a problem that only seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, and that's a pretty defensible request, I'd say, with the NHTSA declaring that it has, quote, identified a clear pattern of driverless autonomous vehicles interfering with law enforcement and other first responders. End quote. And that's not purposely interfering. It's interfering because of their ineptitude, because they don't work as well as we're sold, as they're sold to us to believe in. And if you doubt this, then just take a look online. You're going to find many, many examples of this because people are rightfully ticked off and take videos when that kind of thing happens. And the agency is given until the end of July for the automakers to present their solutions, noting that, quote, emergency scenes are not rare or extreme edge cases. As such, NHTSA is today issuing a call to action for AV developers and operators to immediately focus their resources on fixing this issue.
It's such a reasonable complaint and just one of the many problems that are left unsolved as driverless cars become even more common. There are so many issues with drivers asleep at the wheel in Teslas, for example, using the car's misnamed full self-driving mode, where according to Tesla itself, human drivers must pay attention to the road and be ready to take over at all times. Unfortunately, it seems that this can be overcome by just wearing sunglasses so your car can't tell if your eyes are shut, as can be seen in recently shared videos, including one of a woman hurtling down a highway in British Columbia, completely conked out in the front seat. There's no end to other examples. I mean, including many Tesla drivers I myself have met who brag about the fact that they're answering calls and doing work and not paying attention to the road at all, and they think that's such a great thing. But of course, this can be hugely problematic.
Yeah, and if you look up that BC video, you'll see she's like completely conked out there. I can't. She's wearing sunglasses, so you can't see if her eyes are closed, which seems to be a way too easy way to overcome the safety features on that. But she looks like she's dead in her seat. Basically, there's a pizza box on the dashboard, and it's just crazy. And the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has pointed out that 17% of fatal car accidents in the U.S. involved drowsy drivers. So as much as some of those videos can be a bit entertaining and it kind of shocks you into laughing, it's really no laughing matter because these things are causing deaths. And if we don't think there's going to be more, we're just fooling ourselves. But at least we can have some more positive vehicle-related news here. The FTC has reached a settlement with John Deere that will require that the farm equipment manufacturer, quote, provide farmers and independent repair providers with the same equipment repair resources, including applicable software capabilities, that it currently provides to its own authorized Deere dealers. So at least we've got another win in the right to repair battle. So I'm pleased with that.
That is great news. Cory Doctorow will be very happy with that. He talked a little bit about that on an interview we had him on in the fall, so a few months ago. Let's hope those rights arrive for more tech products as we move into the future. And speaking about moving into the future, we've talked a lot about humanoid robots. And check out Jeff's YouTube segment on our home humanoid robots worth the worry or cost from our 38th episode for more on that. Yes, our episodes are numbered over on YouTube. But it looks like we might not be moving as swiftly into the future as some had hoped, with a business in China where 90% of humanoid robots are produced that rents out robots, noting that they're still many, many years away from effectively replacing human labor. This does not surprise me, actually.
No, that totally tracks. And I'll just quote the guy in charge of that endeavor who said that, quote, the market for humanoid sales hasn't really taken off yet because today's robots still can't operate on their own. They're basically oversized toys. And we've seen no end if you watch that segment Amber just talked about where there are humans behind the scenes operating those robots, trying to convince us that you know we've got our privacy intact, and these are really impressive autonomous humanoid robots. Typically, they are not. Typically, at some point, there's a human somewhere operating them. So it's just kind of crazy. It's definitely exciting to think of the future potential of that, but anyone without an awful lot of money to spare should probably spend their earnings somewhere else for the time being.
Absolutely. And on the topic of spending your earnings, prediction markets have become increasingly popular with businesses like Kalshi and Polymarket raking in money stateside. And there are now moves to allow more prediction market betting in Canada. Jeff talks about what prediction markets really are and whether they should exist in Canada at all or anywhere else for that matter. And that's coming up next on The Other Mac. That's after the break. So stick around.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167. The Other Mac.
By now, you've probably heard of prediction markets, or at least the two most prominent players in the space in the United States, Kalshi and Polymarket. And it looks like we're going to be seeing even more of them, given that Canada has begun to allow some of this exact activity in this country, starting with Wealthsimple. So let's begin with a definition so that we're all on the same page. Prediction markets are open markets that allow participants to buy and sell contracts whose value depends on the outcome of future events. These contracts are often binary, meaning they answer a yes or no question, and if you bet on what actually ends up happening, then you can potentially profit from it. So in simple terms, a prediction market will allow you to place a bet on things like, will the central bank raise interest rates by the end of the month? Or an increasingly popular class of bets for some reason, on whether U.S. President Donald Trump will say a specific word at a campaign rally or in an interview. And again, if you're right, you can potentially earn money. Now, some people may see this as harmless fun, and others may see it just as fools and their money being soon parted. But the acceptance of prediction markets needs to be looked at more thoroughly than just that, as there are some very serious issues with the practice, whatever you think of gambling in general. First of all, prediction markets are particularly susceptible to insider trading, meaning that participants with non-public information can make bets on things they know for sure are going to happen. And a stellar example of this took place earlier this year when a 38-year-old U.S. Special Forces soldier involved in the planning and execution to capture Venezuelan tyrant Nicolas Maduro made $400,000 on Polymarket by essentially betting that Maduro would be removed by the U.S. military, something he knew was going to happen. Now, that kind of thing in this case isn't just an ethical shortcoming. It could also put national security at risk depending on the nature of the bet. And there can be bets made about wars and violence and all that sort of stuff, at least in the States at this point. And while prediction market companies will claim that they take steps to prevent insider trading, it's pretty easy to see how difficult that would be to do reliably. And that's assuming they are even legitimately interested in preventing it as opposed to just preventing the bad press that results from it. And if that sounds familiar, then it's because it's frankly very closely parallel to how social media companies have approached child safety and other issues, at least in my opinion. There are also issues around market manipulation. For example, the Wall Street Journal recently uncovered that Polymarket was paying dozens of online influencers to post deceptive videos to make it seem like they were making a ton of money off of Polymarket bets, such as one video of an influencer pretending to win $100,000 on a bet that Trump would say the word McDonald's when no such winning ever took place. Polymarket, as the Wall Street Journal covered, paid these influencers to film themselves making fake trades and sometimes scoring fake wins, using fake copies of Polymarket's own website that were created by Polymarket itself, all while insisting the influencers not reveal that they were being paid by Polymarket. In the end, while the 118 influencer videos paid for by Polymarket showed creators winning almost $900,000 through the prediction market site, in reality, those exact bets would have lost over $166,000. As you might have expected given the outrageous behavior of too many tech bros these days, that fact just did not matter to Polymarket, which then flooded the internet with those fake videos by recruiting a social media army to copy and repost creators' footage. But don't worry, Polymarket, again, much like some of the social media and AI companies knowingly harming our kids, released a statement saying it was, quote, committed to maintaining accurate, fair, and transparent markets. We are part of a rapidly growing industry and are constantly evaluating ways to improve how we're engaging and earning the trust of our audience, end quote. Well, if all of that doesn't seem crooked enough for you, and let me preface this with the fact that the first Trump administration was the one that struck down the long-standing U.S. federal ban on sports betting in 2018, let me just point out that the U.S. president's son, Don Jr., is a strategic advisor to both Kalshi and Polymarket, and he's far from the only one with ties to the administration involved who is further enabling this kind of behavior. And consider that relative to the fact that prediction market traders have bet almost $200 million on the upcoming U.S. midterm elections so far, which hints at how prediction markets can potentially manipulate not just trading markets, but election results, convincing users that the odds are so stacked against a politician that there's no point in even getting out to vote for them. But one of the biggest issues around prediction markets, and the one that's attracting criticism from public health advocates, is the danger that surrounds online gambling relative to addiction and the resulting financial impacts on users. As UCLA gambling researcher Timothy Fong noted, quote, "When you expand access and availability and normalization of gambling, you're going to have more participation. When you have more participation and engagement in risky products, you're going to have more problems. You're going to have more side effects," end quote. Now, it's important to note that the prediction market bros will even go so far as to argue that this isn't gambling, their take being that it's just trading event derivatives, nothing to see here. So I'm very hopeful that one of the many lawsuits filed against this ridiculous interpretation will succeed. But even if you wanted to look at prediction markets as something other than gambling, let's take a look at the results. Researchers at the London Business School and Yale University recently published a paper that noted that only about 3% of Polymarket accounts consistently earned profits, with the top 1% of users capturing almost 77% of the profits, and the vast majority of people actually losing money. And that's a feature, not a bug, because prediction markets rely on most people being losers. Since there's no house to bet against, you're competing against other users. So to win big, someone has to lose big. Compare this to traditional long-term stock market investments, where there's almost a 100% chance of making a profit after 15 years, and well above 50% over probably even a few months. And you'll see that prediction markets are not a place where your average person is very likely at all to improve their financial situation. So why would any jurisdiction allow prediction markets? Well, in Canada, where Wealthsimple has been given permission to offer clients access to event contracts through Kalshi, we're limiting trades to betting on financial markets, economic indicators, and climate trends. So there's none of the, frankly, quite strange political sports and entertainment betting that's allowed in the US, at least to begin with, though I'm fairly certain there will be huge pressures to eliminate that restriction as time goes on. But while this may get rid of some types of risks, the real question is, why allow it at all? The vast majority of people will still lose money, and the addiction issues still exist. So what's the motivation here? I guess there's the laissez-faire argument that it's better to default on the side of allowing new things instead of preventing them, so that, if I can be generous, we can see how they actually affect society and react to that. But, how has that worked over the past 20 years of social media? How's it working with AI so far? It's very hard to put the genie back in the bottle, and anyone but the most extreme libertarian would have to admit that society just can't exist with some amount of regulation. We accept this in most parts of our lives, so why are we going to let Canadians be another group of guinea pigs to enrich some ethically compromised tech bros while our social safety net struggles to deal with the very real consequences? Now, I've got a math degree. I've studied economics at the undergrad and graduate levels. I believe in small government. I believe letting people manage their own decisions is the right thing to do whenever you can do that. But between the inexplicable embrace of online sports betting to the now potential acceptance of prediction markets, I just don't understand why politicians are opening the door to this kind of harmful nonsense, except out of complete ignorance, which was pretty much the case with both social media and AI. So, at least if you go to a casino, you can claim that there's some entertainment value in the experience. But that's not what's happening here, where a generation of financially anxious young people are being exposed at every waking hour to companies advertising, as we can see with the Polymarket fiasco I covered earlier, and obviously sports betting and stuff like that. We're perfectly happy to pretend that they're offering some kind of financial opportunity when the vast majority of the time, all they're offering is guaranteed losses and potential addiction. Our society should not have to clean up their mess. So I, for one, will be giving a solid no to prediction markets, whatever the frankly spineless folks, and some of them at least in our political class, decide. We'd love to hear your take, so let us know your thoughts about prediction markets on our socials. I'm the other Mac. And coming up after the break, what the next generation can learn from one of the co-founders behind iconic brands, including Paw Patrol and the Rubik's Cube.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Ronnen Harary is the co-founder of Spin Master. Ronnen helped transform a small startup launched by 3 university friends into a global children's entertainment company behind iconic brands including Paw Patrol, Hatchimals, Air Hogs, and even the Rubik's Cube, generating billions in annual revenue and operating in more than 100 countries worldwide. Amber spoke with Ronnen about his new book, No Experience Necessary, and here's their conversation.
Work smarter.
Let's talk a little bit about the book. It is titled No Experience Necessary, which is probably the opposite of what most people going into business hear. So, where did you come up with this idea?
You know, I came up with the idea maybe about 10 years ago when I was just thinking, entering middle age and thinking about the power of your 20s and what accrues to you back then. And it was kind of a book that I would have liked to have been written when I was younger. And, I grew up with a learning disability and I got identified at age 10. And for me, it was very difficult to get through school. I was very lucky to actually get identified, but I knew that the typical route of academics was not necessarily for me. And so I think it's a culmination of my early identification of academics not being my roots, and then marrying that with being able to look back on how magical the 20s are, and that I wanted to share my thoughts about how you can bet on yourself and take a risk on yourself, and you can do things differently. They don't have to be the natural conformed ways. They don't have to be the ways that your parents did things or your grandparents or the way society wants you to live your life, and you can define it yourself. And I'm very passionate about, people defining success individually. It's a very personal thing to them. And so I just wanted to share those insights and give something back.
What's really interesting about your story is over the years, I've interviewed so many people in business who talk about their 20s as a time where they were experimenting. And it wasn't until their 30s or sometimes 40s or later that they actually launched a successful business. So I find the story of Spin Master particularly interesting because not only did you launch this business in your 20s, but also it continues to thrive today. So, how were you able to keep up that momentum?
Well, first, I want to share the average age of an entrepreneur is 38. I'm just an advocate of starting early in life and letting those benefits accrue to you, especially from an equity perspective. Having your passion and your enthusiasm and your energies go towards something that you're actually building rather than going towards something someone else is building. But I think it's curiosity and passion. I mean, we're just curious about learning and growing and trying new things. And, we started out with super humble beginnings with a little earth buddy you put in water and grows grass for hair. And after being in the toy business for about 7 or 8 years, I got enthralled with animation and I started to learn all about it and started to go to Japan. And actually, you're sitting with the person who passed on Beyblade. so, and, I think it's a combination of wanting to strive for things. So, for example, when I passed on Beyblade, it's a crazy story. I went to Japan and they showed me the spinning tops, and I brought them back to my partners, and they were like, "Yeah, spinning tops, not so cool." And so we passed on it. I went back 6 months later, and I said, "What's happening with Beyblade?" And they said, "It's great. We're doing a TV show." And I'm like, "You're doing a TV show." I said, "Is there any opportunity for us to get back involved?" And they said, "No, sorry, we did a deal with Hasbro." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." I'm like, "But you didn't tell me there was gonna be a TV show." They're like, "Sorry, it's done." And that stayed with me, and, Beyblade's gone on to be this huge success. It's done billions and billions of dollars for Hasbro. It will continue to do billions and billions of dollars for Hasbro. Um, but that insight of that passing on that was such a great learning for me and a motivator to actually produce our own show when the time was right. And so it's these experiences of always staying in the game, never betting the farm, that drive us to continue to go forward. And so when that moment happened, I was like, I want our shot at doing a TV show. And TV shows are so interesting and they're so challenging. Um, and we got our first opportunity in 2008 with Bakugan. And we brought that to market and went around the globe at 150 countries, 4 seasons. Um, so I think it's curiosity and passion and constantly wanting to be challenged that drive us.
It's also incredible to think about how many successes you've had even since then. As the mom of a 17-year-old boy, I know many of the brands that you've created, such as Paw Patrol. I remember when Hatchimals first came out, and just hit after hit. I wanted to ask a little bit about the toy business because it's interesting when you step back and you think about it. Most people, of course, if especially if you have kids, you've bought toys, there are these iconic brands, and yet we don't really know a lot about this business. I mostly work in tech, so we know a lot of the technology success stories. So tell me a little bit about what's unique about the toy business. How do toys even get invented in the first place?
Well, first thing you need to know is once you enter the toy business, you never leave. It's amazing how many people are still in the business. Um, it's actually got a rich history of invention. So there's about 200 inventors around the globe that their full-time job is coming up with ideas. And they don't commercialize them, but they'll come to companies like Spin Master, Hasbro, Mattel, Jack Pacific, etc. And they'll present the idea. And if you like it, then you will do the commercialization and marketing manufacturing, and you'll pay them a 5% royalty in perpetuity. And so the great thing for us, especially starting as a company from scratch, was we had this brain trust of toy inventors, and they weren't on our payroll, and we just shared the upside with them, which is a great model, especially when you're starting out as an entrepreneur. Um, and so we see about 3 to 4 thousand ideas every single year from these inventors. And then the key is to be very judicious in terms of what you actually bring to market, allocate the capital to, and develop. And that's kind of the business. And you bring things to market. We've had lots of failures. In our early 90s, we had a string of failures like Don't Free Freddy, Key Charm Cuties, Tickle Secrets Baby. I'll never forget when we did the commercial for Don't Free Freddy, and these were all from inventors. These were early days. And I saw that we were testing the commercial with some kids, and there was a young boy, who's probably 7 or 8 years old, and he just had this deadpan look on his face. And I knew at that moment in time, I'm like, this product is not going to go, and it didn't go. Um, and so the key thing with the toy industry is not getting emotional about stuff you bring to market. And if it doesn't go, you mark it down, you clear out the inventory, you move on to the next product. You don't blame anybody in the company. That's something special to Spin Master. We don't blame because the creative process has so many different attributes that make something successful. But it's the toy industry is, I would say, half art and half science. And the art part is being like a 7-year-old, and the science part is knowing the history, what's done well, what hasn't done well, and really being a student of the toy industry.
Uh, I keep getting obsessed about you starting a business in your 20s, and this book, of course, is focusing on people in their 20s as well who are interested in entrepreneurship. And I'm just curious. Who inspired you? Because when you're in your 20s, most people are not thinking about creating a product for kids because they kind of want to leave their childhood behind. So, who inspired you to actually build Spin Master into this incredible, iconic brand?
Again, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to go into business for myself, and I was always curious as a kid. My parents were classic immigrants, small business. My dad had a Persian carpet gallery in Toronto. My mom worked with my dad, and there was lots of. At 6 o'clock, we ate dinner every 6 o'clock as a family, day in, day out. But all the conversations were around business, and so I was steeped in business discussion. and I was curious as a kid. I was always the kid looking up and looking at architecture and buildings and stuff like that. Um, and so it was just curiosity, and the toy industry found us. If you would have asked me in university if I was going to go into the toy industry, I would have said to you, Amber, like, it never crossed my mind. But being young, and I think this is an important thing, is like meeting yourself where you're at and not overthinking things. And I think if you're going to go into business for yourself, you need more of a philosophy than you need more, particularly what you're actually going to do. Right. And so we said to ourselves, we're going to go into business for ourselves. We're going to build a business as big as we possibly can. And we weren't that discerning about what it was going to be truthful. And so when we produced our Devil Sticks, which was our second product, and we found ourselves with distribution Kmart, Toys R Us, 2,000 stores. In 1995, we were 24 years old, and we sold over 1.5 million Devil Sticks. We said, okay, we can go into horticulture, we can go into toys. And we're like, this toy thing seems interesting. And there's all these toy inventors, so let's continue giving it a try. And we just went from there, and we got better at our craft. That was the thing. We just did one product after another product, year in, year out, toy show after toy show. And we just stuck with something that was working. But we didn't know beforehand exactly what it was going to be. So it wasn't premeditated. I wasn't like, as a 16-year-old kid, I love the toy industry. I love the toy industry. I just really love business. And I found that we were good at it. So we stayed with it.
I think a lot of people assume that it's more difficult today in 2026 to start a business. But like you, I remember growing up in an entrepreneurial family. My parents worked together. They started their own business, and it was really, really hard for them. There was no internet. There was no artificial intelligence. There was no social media for marketing. None of those things existed. And so I'm curious what you think about this moment in time right now. We know a lot of young people in their 20s are struggling financially, but is it a good time to start a business in Canada and beyond?
Listen, I'm like you. We started a business in the early 90s, and it was the recession in Canada. I think that it's important to not let the moment define you, but it's better for you to define the moment yourself. And I think that there's certain things that you have that the moment can never take away from you. And those are your talents, your creativity, your passion, what you're interested in, um, your energy level. When you're in your 20s are the time is not going to change your energy. That's irrelevant. Um, I do think that for younger people, it's been difficult, right? There's been with COVID and the economy, and uh, so much transition and technology changes. So it is a tumultuous time. But again, I would say you need to lean into what you have. This is your moment. This is your moment. So you need to work with the tools that you have, just like previous generations. And there are certain advantages, like you talk about, with AI. There is certain things that um, enable you to bring down the cost of starting a business and the barriers to entry, and to bring prototypes to market, or proof of concepts, or presentations, or to be able to express your ideas. And after you've expressed your ideas, to go out and raise money if that's the case, or to attract people to you based on your ideas. I have a friend of mine who she built her whole proof of concept with Claude Code. And she wouldn't be able to do it if not for the technology. She would have had to hire engineers and stuff like that. So I think that the other thing is that I'm an advocate of people taking control of their own destiny. And maybe this is more of this time in history is forcing people to actually move into that realm. And, as we like to say at Spin Master, we turn lemons into lemonade. and, and I think that there's always opportunities to move forward in your favor.
Let's talk a little bit about the advantages of entrepreneurship, because you talk about this in your book. And I also watched an interview that you did with CP24, where you said that you need to decide if you're going to own your time or rent your time. And that really spoke to me. I was thinking about a very popular quote that says, only an entrepreneur works 80 hours so they don't have to work 40. And I think that's true. So what does the freedom of entrepreneurship mean, and what should attract people in their 20s to it?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one is control. You be able to control how you work, your own philosophy, the culture that you want to build, the people that you want to work with, how you want to do things. I mean, for myself, I've never done a PowerPoint presentation my whole life. And so the way I conduct the meeting is very original and very different. So you're able to do things your way that work for you and bring out the best in you. Um, I think that you're able to paint your own masterpiece. I think that business is considered, very much like risk, return, numbers, bottom line, profit, loss. But I consider it an art form. And the difference with business is that we're not using acrylic paints, and we're not using uh, um, clay to sculpt, but we're interacting with human beings to bring things into the world, and we're birthing things into the world that have never been done before, right? And so it's the same thing as an art. So I think it's an expression of yourself, and that's one of the greatest things that you're able to do is you're able to express yourself in the way that works for you and bring people along. I think that I think that you're able to get that 80 hours a week because you're curious and you're passionate. And when you're passionate about something, passion delevers risk. It's actually riskier to do something that you're not passionate and you're curious about in your life than to actually do what you want to do, because that 80 hours just goes by like in a snap, right? It's really not a big deal for you, right? And you're enjoying the moment and you're in the moment, right? So it's for me, I'll never forget, when we started producing the air hogs, I had to go to Chicago to develop the air hogs. I went there literally every single month. And I was so excited to see the development of the air hogs, which is the air pressure plane. And then I went to Asia, found a factory. I lived in a factory for 2 months. I used to ride to work in a rickshaw. I used to bring oranges. It was in the 90s. And I was so lonely at certain times. And the only place that reminded me of home was a McDonald's. They had one McDonald's in the town. I used to just go there and sit. And, but I was so enthralled with the learning curve that I was good with it in the different cultures. And so I think that gives you the ability to, like, you're learning things that you're interested in. And that's the most powerful thing. And then it doesn't seem like work to you, and you're doing it for yourself.
What do you think is the number one lesson that you've learned along the way that you wish you knew in your 20s?
Life is long and you don't have to rush, and don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously and really enjoy the journey. I think the most important thing is, like, when you're younger, you're really trying to achieve, at least for myself. Um, and I probably could have had more fun along the way.
So, where do you go now? I know the book is really focused again on advice for people in their 20s. But for you professionally, what are you thinking at this moment in time? Because I'm sure there's lots of people who may read the book who maybe are a little bit older. There's lots to take away from it as well. Entrepreneurship can happen, of course, in any decade.
Yep.
But looking forward, what are some of your dreams after you've built again such an incredible company that continues to thrive?
Well, I would say that you can bet on yourself at any point in your life. And I think that's one of the things. When I wrote the book, I was very squarely focused on the 20s. But now that I've had people read the book, especially people in their 30s and 40s, some people get upset with me. They're like, Renan, you really made me reassess my 20s. um, but there's lessons in there for everybody, even for myself, to bet on yourself in all aspects. And for me, from a business perspective, we're at an interesting junction where we're trying to get the business to transition beyond the founders, and we want the company to live on, to be around for 100 years, similar to like a Nintendo, where it's multi-generational. It's more about the culture itself, and the culture is the moat. And that's the most important thing, and keeping the culture where you can replicate the success and the ways of doing things. That's where we're very much focused today. And then for myself, it's more on my personal life, and giving that some attention and care, which I've kind of neglected for many years.
Uh, One last question for you, and I think this ties back to both the book, but also the question I had for you about this moment in time, and also about Canada moving forward. Because I've lived in the U.S., I've also lived in Canada. One of the things I loved about living in the U.S. is this celebration of entrepreneurship. I'm not saying that we don't have that in Canada; it absolutely does exist, but not to the same extent. Do you see the next few years as maybe changing that, knowing that entrepreneurship continues to be such an important part of our economy and growth in this country.
Listen, we're very blessed to live in one of the best countries in the world and have the most incredible universities, the most incredible people, the most incredible support, most incredible resources. We have it all. We have it all. And I think that it's time for us to really embrace everything and celebrate it, and lift our game 5x or 10x, because the world is getting very competitive and it's not the same way it was in the 80s or 90s. And we want to keep our talent in Canada. We don't want to go south of the border, and a lot of it goes south of the border. People go to university here and they go to school and they get educated and then they go south, right? We should be attracting more people from the south here. It should be the inverse. And I think that there's lots of opportunity to change that narrative. It's going to take a concerted effort from multiple levels of private and public, and the government. But I think that it's our time. It's our time to shine. I would say this is that it's from an entrepreneurial perspective, we have everything available to be really, really successful. It's just a mindset at the end of the day.
Well, I'm very grateful for this book because I think it can help people to shift that mindset and see the opportunity that does exist. I'm really thankful for all the time that you spent with me as well, because the book is just coming out this week. So by the time people are hearing this, they'll be able to go out and get their copy of the book. What do you hope that they take away from it? What would be a win for you? I know having a book is like birthing a child. So what would be a
So
win
hard.
for you?
It's so hard. Listen, the wins are the stories. And so if anybody's listening to this and you're kind enough to buy the book and read the book, if it impacted you in a certain way, please share the story with me. That would be the most important thing. And I think that I'm all into people reaching their full potential. That's the most important thing for me. And so if this book helped you reach your full potential, or, we all fight resistance in life. Taking risk is difficult. And I write a chapter called The Inverse Risk. There's 2 chapters on risk in this book. It's the first chapter and it's the last chapter. And the inverse risk is that it's easy to game out the downside, but it's hard to game out the upside. And if you do take the risk and you push through the resistance, you are going to embark on the screenplay of your life. And so that would be the thing that I would hope for the most, is that people get to see the screenplay of their life, and whatever's important to them. And if the book helped them make that little leap of faith and get there, that would be incredible.
Thank you, Ronnen and Amber. And if you want to check out the video versions of today's segment, please head over to Amber Mac on YouTube. And if you missed a past episode, you can subscribe and get them wherever you got your podcasts. And every new listener makes a difference. So take a listen, catch us on SiriusXM, and we'll see you next week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.